Vaulted Truths, Episode 3. My wife walked out of the courtroom smiling. She got the house. She got most of the money. And she thought she had won. What she didn't know was that one email was about to destroy everything. This is my story, and the vault is open. David never imagined his marriage would end in a courtroom. For 14 years, he and Melissa had built what looked like a stable life together. They had 2 children, a comfortable home in Denver, and the kind of routine that slowly becomes invisible because it feels permanent. David worked as a financial consultant, while Melissa managed operations for a healthcare company. They weren't wealthy, but they were comfortable. At least, that's what David believed. The first signs of trouble were subtle. Melissa started working later than usual. Her phone became an extension of her hand. She took calls in other rooms and smiled at messages she quickly locked whenever David walked past. When he asked about it, she always had an explanation: work pressure, new projects, or difficult clients. David wanted to believe her, so he did. For nearly a year, he ignored the feeling in his stomach that something wasn't right. Then, one evening, everything changed. David had stopped by Melissa's office to surprise her with dinner. It wasn't something he usually did, but she had mentioned working late again, and he thought it would be a nice gesture. When he arrived, the receptionist looked confused. Melissa had left over 2 hours earlier. David stood there holding a bag of takeout food, while his entire world shifted slightly off balance. When Melissa finally came home that night, she claimed she had been meeting with a client. The explanation sounded rehearsed. David didn't argue, but for the first time, he stopped trusting what he was being told. A month later, he learned the truth. Melissa wasn't staying late at work. She was having an affair with her manager. The discovery destroyed him, not because of the affair itself, but because of how long it had been happening. Almost 18 months of lies, fake business trips, fake meetings, and fake explanations. Within weeks, the marriage collapsed. Melissa moved into an apartment downtown, and the divorce process began shortly afterward. David expected the court proceedings to be difficult, but what he didn't expect was how aggressively Melissa approached them. She hired an expensive attorney and fought for everything. Every account, every asset, and every detail became a battle. The process dragged on for months. By the time the final hearing arrived, David felt emotionally exhausted, wanting closure more than victory.
The court's decision hit him harder than he expected. Melissa was awarded the family home, received a larger share of the marital assets, and secured significant support payments. Legally, everything had been decided. As people left the courtroom, David watched Melissa laughing with her attorney. She looked relieved, victorious even. For the first time since the divorce began, David felt completely defeated. That evening, he sat alone in his apartment, staring at a wall. 14 years of marriage had ended. His children would now split time between 2 homes. His savings had been reduced dramatically, and somehow, the person who had betrayed him seemed to be walking away with everything. 3 weeks later, his phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. Normally, he would have ignored it, but something told him to answer. A woman introduced herself as Karen, an employee at Melissa's company. Her voice sounded nervous as she asked if they could meet privately. David almost declined, trying to move forward rather than reopen old wounds. But Karen insisted there was something important he needed to see. The next morning, they met at a small coffee shop. Karen arrived carrying a thick folder and slid it across the table without saying a word. David opened it to find printed emails. Dozens at first, then hundreds. As he continued reading, his confusion slowly turned into disbelief. The emails weren't romantic conversations or affair messages. They were financial discussions. Melissa and her manager had been coordinating money transfers months before the divorce filing. Large sums of money, tens of thousands of dollars at a time, were being transferred into accounts under Melissa's sister's name. The purpose was obvious: hide assets, reduce what appeared on financial disclosures, and manipulate the divorce settlement. David spent nearly an hour reviewing the documents. Each page made the situation worse, detailing account numbers, transfer confirmations, instructions, and timelines. The evidence was overwhelming. Karen explained that she had discovered the emails during an internal audit. She hadn't known what to do at first, but after learning about the divorce outcome, she couldn't ignore it. David thanked her and immediately called his attorney, whose reaction was immediate. "We're going back to court." The following weeks were a blur of meetings, filings, and legal preparation. The evidence had to be verified, the emails had to be authenticated, Financial experts reviewed account records, and investigators traced the hidden funds. The deeper they looked, the worse it became. Melissa hadn't hidden $20,000 or even $50,000. She had concealed more than $200,000. Money she had sworn, under oath, did not exist, moved deliberately before filing for divorce. Months later, everyone found themselves back in the same courtroom. Melissa entered confidently, appearing relaxed, and her attorney seemed equally comfortable. Neither of them knew exactly what David's legal team had discovered. The hearing began normally. Then, David's attorney stood up and handed a stack of documents to the judge. The judge started reading. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The courtroom grew silent. Nobody moved, and nobody spoke as the judge continued turning pages. David watched Melissa carefully. At first, she looked bored, then confused, then concerned, until finally, genuine panic appeared on her face. Her attorney leaned closer, whispering urgently. But Melissa didn't respond. She simply stared at the documents. The judge eventually placed the papers on the bench and looked directly at her. The courtroom felt frozen. The judge's voice was calm, but every word landed like a hammer. The court found that Melissa had intentionally concealed marital assets, submitted false financial disclosures, and violated legal obligations during the divorce proceedings. The original settlement was overturned. The hidden assets were recovered. Financial penalties were imposed, and additional legal consequences were recommended. Melissa's expression collapsed, and the confidence she had carried into the courtroom disappeared instantly. For the second time in his life, David watched everything change in a single afternoon. But this time, it wasn't his life falling apart. It was hers. The consequences didn't stop there. News of the hearing reached Melissa's employer, and the company launched an internal investigation. The same emails that had destroyed her court case also exposed unethical conduct inside the organization. Within weeks, both Melissa and her manager were terminated. The affair had cost her marriage, the deception had cost her credibility, and the greed had cost her career. Meanwhile, David slowly rebuilt his life. He purchased a smaller house closer to his children's school, focused on work, and spent weekends coaching his son's soccer team and helping his daughter with homework. Life wasn't perfect, but it felt honest again. One afternoon, nearly a year later, a friend asked him whether he hated Melissa. David thought about the question carefully. There was a time when he probably would have said yes, a time when anger consumed almost every thought he had. But not anymore. He smiled and shook his head, saying, "I don't need revenge. The truth handled that for me." Months passed, then years. The pain faded, and the betrayal became a memory instead of a wound. David learned something he wished he had understood sooner. People can hide the truth for a while, sometimes for months or even years, but lies are expensive. Eventually, they demand payment, and sooner or later, the bill always arrives. That is the truth that was locked away in today's vault. A woman who thought she had won, a man who thought he had lost everything, and one email that changed the outcome forever. If this story reached you, leave a comment below and tell us what you think. The vault is open, and we're listening. And remember, no matter how long it stays locked, the vault always opens.